have been taken to make this a very useful and successful day. So as people continue to join in, I would like to introduce the division director of the Division of State Schools with the Office of Special Education and Early Learning, or OSEAL is the acronym, and Carol Ann Morrison. And Carol Ann is going to share with us her experiences in developing the grant that is associated with this activity. So Kentucky Project Leads has been Carol Ann's baby, along with the committee, and she was in the trenches pre-COVID and through the approval process and post-COVID, and has been a real guide to us as we try to understand the various components of the grant and make sure that we're steering as we should. And so, Carol Ann, without further ado, if you would like to talk to us a little bit about your experiences in grant writing.
Sure. Thank you, Pete. Good morning. It's nice to be here with all of you today. And I will say what I mentioned to this group that was preparing earlier in the week. It's really exciting to see how this grant has come to life in what we envisioned when we were writing this and putting it together, and now seeing these Saturday seminars and how it's going. It's really exciting to see the work that is being done and the opportunities that you are having to participate in these virtual Saturday seminars, I think are just incredible. So it's exciting for me to be a part of this and see it in action. I will first and foremost say that the most important key piece, I think, to the grant writing process for us was having a really strong collaborating team. We had to work together to accomplish a lot of tasks very quickly. So we put together a core team that worked to help write the grant, and we had people with different roles and responsibilities. We had Greta Hilton, our associate commissioner, was kind of the one to start this grant. She saw the grant proposal and had an idea and kind of had the vision for where it might go, and it developed from there. So she kind of helped us with the vision of what she'd like to see, and we kind of took that and ran with it. I did a lot of work around organizing everything, keeping things on track, on timeline, collection of letters of support. I think we collected over 25 letters of support from different professionals and organizations when we were writing the grant. So I ensured that the appropriate people were contacting them to request the letters, and then I collected those and organized that. We also had to collect biographies and resumes for all of the staff in our office that were going to be a part of implementing our program, our Kentucky Leads program. So I worked on that, as well as a lot of editing on the final narrative and written document. We also had Jonathan, who you'll meet a little bit later, and he did a lot of work around the finance piece and developing the budget that we wanted to utilize for the grant. And then we had two other staff members that worked on actually writing the narrative and developing the evaluation process for the grant. So it was really a collaborative team effort for us to be able to put all of this together. We did, at the very beginning, we scheduled regular weekly meetings, and I think that was very helpful, having those on the calendar and touching base once a week, where we would give each other updates, and then we would also discuss next steps and things that we needed to have accomplished before the following week when we came back together as a team. So I think that was part of what made this really successful for us. We did actually hit the pandemic before we submitted the grant, so that kind of came our way in the middle of all of this work. And because we had a well planned out timeline, it really didn't slow us down. We were still able to submit everything on time and get everything accomplished, even with the added meetings and work and craziness going on around us. We were still able to meet all of those deadlines. So that was really good to have that established timeline in place. That's all I was going to share with you all today, but I just really wanted to emphasize the importance of the team effort and the collaboration when working on these. So that's all I have, Pete, unless you want me to share anything else. I think you're on mute, Pete.
Thank you. Sorry for that.
I know, I always forget.
Appreciate you sharing your experiences, and I think it's a great foundation as we work through the rest of the seminar today to kind of bring some reality and some life to the paper and to the budget and to the all of the hard work that's gone into this, and appreciate the kind of the viewpoint and the lens to look through from the backside, if you will. And as leaders and working with these scholars, their competencies that they will gain today should allow them to have a level of confidence going forward in their district and with their agencies to feel a level of comfort, because it can be very threatening. It can be, oh, that's for the other guy, you know, that federal money, woo, that's a big ask. And I think that getting this confidence today and having the expertise of the group today that's presenting as a contact, as a follow-up, is a huge, huge confidence builder. And thanks again for that. And Dr. Williams, if you will, you want to talk with us a bit about project updates. You have some very exciting news to share with us, so please do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pete. And also thank you, Carol Ann. As Pete just recently mentioned, we do have a few celebrations that we want to share with you all. The first celebration is that we submitted a proposal to present at 0 to 3. We're presenting in regards to Kentucky Leads and what we're doing here, the great work that we're doing. We were accepted to present a poster presentation for the conference. We'll have additional information in the upcoming months. But it's extremely exciting. I believe the conference is in October. It's a virtual conference. So again, it's extremely exciting because we're taking Kentucky Leads from a state level and we're moving it to a national platform. So I think that is absolutely amazing. And also to add to that is that we've only been in with Kentucky Leads only for maybe 6 months, and just to see that we've already been accepted to present on the work that we're doing here in Kentucky is also amazing. So that's one celebration. Another celebration is, I think we mentioned a couple of months ago that we were working towards having a logo for Kentucky Leads, and I'm happy to say that we have our logo. So if I'm going to attempt to show you all the logo for Kentucky Leads. And again, that's one of the great things about being a part of an inaugural cohort, is that you're able to be a part of the process of building this phenomenal work. So let me attempt to share my screen. Okay, so here is our logo. So this is the logo that we will be using. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to go into SharePoint, but this logo is also on SharePoint. So again, this is our Kentucky Leads logo. We're very excited about the logo because it means that we are definitely moving forward with this project. So it's extremely exciting, and we're all happy to be a part of this process. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that we have begun talking about how do we enhance the network? How do we expand partnerships? So we are looking to open our Saturday seminars to the larger crowd. So what does that mean? So that means that we're going to, in the next couple of months, we're going to open it up to the crowd where there'll be non-cohort members. So they'll be able to participate with the Saturday seminars. So they will not be on the entire time that you all are meeting. They'll be on an allotted time, maybe an hour or so of the presentation. But we are going to start inviting and opening these Saturday seminars to your fellow colleagues. And we do believe that this will allow you to expand your network, which is extremely important, and also to serve as a professional development with your colleagues around the state. So we're very excited about that. That we're going to open the Saturday seminars to non-cohort members. So they will not be able to participate with every Saturday seminar. So Bill and the curriculum committee, they're going to look at which seminars will be appropriate for them to attend. So right now we're thinking quarterly, that we'll open these meetings up quarterly to your colleagues around the state. So again, this is very exciting because it means that we are expanding our network with Kentucky Leads. So those are the updates that I have, Pete. I'm not sure if you may want to add something, something I may have missed, but those are my updates.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of connect back to the big ask component of this, because there are agencies that have supported this grant from the very beginning, that have shared letters of support, and they are on national agencies, and they do have a national footprint. And I think the presentation potential at the conference, at the 0 to 3 conference, is an example of making that bigger network, that larger connection of folks that you can make contacts with, reach out to and say, I've never done this before. How exactly does this work? Or how does this component fit? Or what would your recommendations be here? And growing that, creating that confidence level is what we are about as far as leadership competencies. So that's all I have, Dr. Williams, and thank you so much for the update. And I see from the chat that folk are quite excited about the logo and have imprint options mentioned over there. So
absolutely, it's definitely exciting because it means that we're moving the project forward. And so this is exactly what we wanted to do. And I'm just happy to be a part of this initiative with each of you. So again, welcome, everyone, welcome, and I hope you have a great seminar today.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Williams. As I suggested earlier in the opening, it's critical that we try to keep a routine in the agenda. And one of the pieces that we're quite excited about, and has proven effective over the 4 months we've been putting this piece together, is Kathy Anderson, our gifted and talented consultant with OSIL, has volunteered her Saturday morning to come in and assist us with the Padlet activity, the technology component, one of the many. And I think Kathy's put some preliminary questions together and can share out those responses from the scholars. So Kathy, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Turn on some light here where we can see it. So glad to be with you. Well, our topic today is grant writing. So I've come up with a couple of questions for us to kind of jumpstart our conversation about grant writing. I'm going to put the link in our chat over here, and then give you a couple of minutes to answer those questions. And I'll share my screen with you so you can also see those questions. And then we'll look at some of the responses. All right. So how are we doing? Is everybody able to see the link? Click on the link there in the chat. All right, we've got some responses here. So the questions are, what is your knowledge of grant writing? I have written many grants and could teach a class. I have written a grant but still learn a thing or two. I have no experience writing grants. Please fill my cup. And then the other question is, why would a grant be written? To supplement other funds, to provide for a need such as additional staffing, to support a district, state, or federal initiative, or all of the above? We've got 10 responses here. Let's see what those responses are. So we're 50-50. What is your knowledge of grant writing? Some have no experience, Jonathan, and some have written a grant but could use some more information. And then number 2, most everybody, looks like everybody said all of the above. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Pete, or to you, Jonathan, to get us started.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Kathy. And I think it's a great pre-assessment and kind of getting a pulse of where the scholars are with relation to Jonathan's topic. And I know he's got a full day session planned for you. And so I'm going to give a little extra time here. And our speaker today is Jonathan Compton. And he is I call him the money man. He's the IDEA fiscal liaison. And he provides a world of knowledge around what's legal within fiscal constraints and how we can spend the money, and keeps us on the straight and narrow with the pocketbook and the checkbook. So a huge asset to us, and hopefully a huge asset to you going forward. So Jonathan, without further ado, if the floor is yours, and take the time that you need, please.
Thank you, Pete. And it's great to be with everyone today on this beautiful sunny day. It's a really pretty Saturday morning, so start to a great weekend. Thank you all for being on here. First, I want to say I just want to compliment the Kentucky Leads team, doing such a fantastic job across the board. They're just doing great work, and you know they've just took off with it, and we're really proud of the Kentucky Leads team and everything they're doing. I'm going to talk today, and as they said, I'm going to give you a general overview of kind of the grant writing process, kind of an overview in submitting a proposal, and just some tips and things to think about, in grant writing, all the way around the process. I'm going to go ahead and put up the PowerPoint here. Let's see. All right, can everyone see that? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'll also say, before I get into this, any questions that anyone has, feel free to, chime in. We can stop. We want to make this as comfortable and, informal as possible for everyone. So if you do have questions, feel free to chime in anytime. So again, we're going to talk about preparing and submitting, a federal grant application, and other grant applications as well. But the experience that we have had and in submitting typically is, through, a federal sponsor. Before getting into the presentation itself, I also want to echo what Carol Ann said. Collaboration is so important. The team effort is huge, in submitting a proposal and, in writing a grant. And we've been lucky at KDE to have a strong team, around us when we've submitted. And, it's just so key to have, that team effort. So I'm going to start out just kind of talking about some general terms, going to, talk about announcements and funding priorities. And then I'm going to kind of get into giving tips about, going through the grant writing process. We'll talk about budget a little bit. And if we have time at the end, I would like to go in to the actual mechanism to where we always submit grants. And it's very common. It's probably the most common online grant submittal, and it's grants.gov. But if there's time at the end, I'll get into that as well. So to start out, as far as just grant, again, the first few slides, we're just going to talk about definitions. So as far as, grant announcements, they let you know about funding, whatever out there that's available for, whatever competition that's there. And they could also, be referred to as a notice inviting applicants. As far as pre-application announcements goes, there's a notice of proposed rulemaking and a notice of final regulations. And for proposed rulemaking, wherever you're getting it from is required to publish and request public comment on the regulations before they issue final regs. And then for the notice of final, they give that 30-day comment period, and then after that, they develop those final regs. As far as also with the pre-application announcements, you have a notice of proposed priority and a notice of final priority. And with the proposed priority, the department, and again with us, when we typically submit, it's usually through OSEP, the Office of Special, federally with OSEP. Everybody's familiar with OSEP. And the department's required to publish and request public comment when they propose a final priority. And the public can give comments again on how to shape these, and it's again a 30-day comment period for final priority, and the department develops the final priority. And then as far as the location of where these announcements are, these are the two most common. So if you're looking, to submit a grant, you're looking to get money for an initiative, these are two really good places to go. And grants.gov is probably the best. I mean, it has everything on there. As far as funding priorities go, so what are funding priorities? They communicate that content of an application. So, that's what the funding priority is going to do. And they're going to identify the department's interest in the issue or the target population, and identify those activities that they're going to fund around. And as far as the types of funding priorities, there's three main types. You have absolute priority, competitive priority, and invitational. And for absolute, that is an absolute focus that has to be met. So you have to meet that priority, and they won't consider that for funding if you don't meet that absolute priority. Now, as far as a competitive priority goes, that will give a preference to address that topic or target population, and with additional points, and they add that to the score, in their peer review. And then for invitational priority, they encourage you to address that topic, but you don't get any preference points if that invitational priority is not addressed. So that's just talking about just the three types of priorities. So again, these are just going through general terms as far as in looking up for a grant. Now, as far as getting into writing a proposal, so you're saying, okay, I'm ready to tackle this, or you may be asked to be on a team. I mean, you may, if you're not individually doing it, you may be asked, okay, I want you to help. In our district, I want you to help, write this grant. And basically, for first steps for developing that proposal is you want to get into those guidelines. So you want to go to grants.gov, dig into the guidelines, and look up that catalog program. And that's usually, you can look it up by CFDA number. That's Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance number. It's like a 84.325. That's what the numbers look like. And you go in there, you look up your catalog program, and you look for whatever that topic is that you want to submit for. And as far as, well, what do I do first? Well, typically when you get in there and you find that proposal or that topic, that criteria you're going to go after, all the programs, they'll have a contact person listed with that description and application there. And it's always good initially to kind of make yourself familiar with that contact person over the proposal. If going through the proposal submittal, and it may be multiple people on your team, it may be one person on your team, but it's a good idea to contact that person multiple times going through, because you're going to have questions. You're going to have questions across multiple areas, and it's a good idea to always know who your contact person is, and, you know, stay familiar with them, because when we submit proposals, there's usually, you know, we usually have a few calls to that person, and they're always helpful. They usually will have a good person that will, you know, that can help you across the spectrum as far as, you know, whatever your question may be. And it's also really important. The guidelines are so important. And when I say the guidelines, you know, that's your directions for submitting the proposal, and they're usually lengthy. If for a federal proposal, it's very lengthy, and you want to know those guidelines front and back, because, you know, what can happen is, you know, you spend all these weeks or months on this proposal, and the last thing you want to happen is to leave something out, to where you do all this work and you submit this proposal and then it's not going to be considered. And this does happen. You know, proposals are submitted, and, you know, the certain requirements out of the guidelines aren't met, whether it may be, you know, so many different things, but you know, it may be something to do with the budget. You know, you might not meet a budget requirement. It may be, you know, something to do with the formatting of the proposal. It may be you leave out a really important priority in the proposal. You don't, but it's so important to know those guidelines front and back before you start, because, you know, you don't want to get in, do all this work, and then, you know, not meet something in the guidelines, and then get blocked. So the first thing that's really important once you decide what you're going to submit for is to become familiar with those guidelines. And when you first look at them, they're going to be, you know, they're pretty overwhelming. I mean, they're usually 70, 80 pages, but once you get into it, you know, there's just certain sections that are really important. And again, it's very important to become familiar with those guidelines. As far as the project, you know, you're going to try to, you know, what you're going to try to do, there may be, you know, a funded project within, you know, our state that covers what you're going to cover. So you want to check that as well. You know, you don't want to submit something identical to something that's already funded. So, you know, you want to have an idea if what you're going after isn't already funded somewhere else identically. And if it is, then, you know, you may want to alter that just to cater address to a new niche, you know, in that proposal, because you don't want to submit something identical to something that's already been funded. As far as generating support for your proposal, you know, as Carol Ann said, when we did Kentucky Leads, I think we got about 25 letters of support, and, you know, very important, having that community backing. And, you know, that network of backing will go a long way when grantors look. You know, the more letters of support, the more impressive letters of support, the better. And, you know, and usually, you know, colleagues are more than happy to give you that letter of support. You know, if you're going after a worthwhile proposal, you know, colleagues are usually more than happy to give you that letter of support. So it's important to get, you know, as many of those as you can. And basically, a good first step if you're a new applicant is, you know, to go for those local individual professionals or organizations which have that solid background in your field of interest, and who will commit, as we talked about in writing, the benefits of your proposal through a letter of support. And as far as submitting the proposal itself, you know, it says here, allow yourself several months. Well, sometimes you're not going to have several months. You know, in an ideal world, you want to allow yourself plenty of time to get those details down of what you're going after, and get all that stuff that you need, you know, those letters of support from all, you know, and all the other things. But, you know, a lot of times, you know, that timeline isn't going to be there. You know, you may have 4 weeks, you may have 6 weeks, you may have 3 weeks. I mean, 3 weeks is pretty, you know, that's a pretty aggressive timeline in going after proposals. Is 3 weeks before it's due, saying, hey, we're going to do this. But, you know, 6 weeks is pretty common to go through 6, you know, about a month and a half to nail down a good proposal. As far as working with that, you know, the agency, whoever you're submitting to, as I'd said before, you want to contact the agency and get that application kit. And as I'd also said, it shouldn't be the only contact that you have with the agency. You should, as you go forward through the process, if you should hopefully be contacting the agency multiple times with questions and different things. And this second point here, the topic, you want to check beforehand and make sure that this approach is acceptable. You might want to use this approach every time, but you can also, send a 1-2 page summary with a cover letter and just ask for feedback and comments, from that sponsor. And in certain situations, it's kind of good to get that beforehand and then, see the response, but before you spend all of this time, submitting and working on the proposal as a team. And along the way, if you see that it just doesn't mesh, then that agency also can recommend other branches or agencies that may be interested in in what you submitted, in what you asked them about. As far as organizing your ideas, so before you begin, you want to start to gather all the documents, the paperwork, everything that's going to be required to accompany that proposal. And throughout the process, it's also helpful to just keep an informal notebook and write those ideas down as they pop up, so you don't forget them later, or it says, I say write them down, but put them in an electronic file, and just keep that notebook on your laptop of with a file of ideas as you go through. And just keep all that in writing so you can reference it, as you go forward. As far as talking about, a successful proposal, there's 6 main components. And with about any, proposal that you want to submit, any grant that you want to write, these 6 comes into play. These are the 6 main components. You have your abstract, which is basically a 1-page summary of your proposal. You have your problem statement, your project objectives, then your project methods or design, that's your project narrative. That's the biggest part of your proposal. You have your project evaluation, and then your project budget. Those are the 6 main components of generally when you write a proposal. And I'm going to talk a little about each of these 6. As far as your abstract, so the abstract is really important because that's the first thing that the funders are going to read. So that's the first thing they're going to look at when they're looking at your proposal. Is going to be this abstract, and that's basically a 1-page summary. And typically in the guidelines, it'll tell you how long the abstract can be. Typically, it's just a few paragraphs, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. But it's about a page long, a summary of your proposal, and in that 1 page, and gives an overview of just the fundamentals of your proposal. And you really want that to jump out at them. That's the first impression that your sponsor is going to get from that proposal, and it's really important. So you want that to jump out. So you want your abstract to be clear, concise, and and really jump out at the sponsoring agency. And this probably isn't something that you would do right at the first of starting writing a grant. Typically, it's easier to do this at the end of your writing process because you have everything in there, all your data has been put in, your proposal, you have it all together, and then you can draw out those highlights from all of the proposal and give that good 1-page summary, that good abstract that you need for a proposal. So the abstract is extremely important because that's going to be the first thing they look at. The problem statement or the need statement, just some tips on that. Again, it should just be a clear and concise account of the issues that need to be addressed, and which were the reason for applying for that in the first place. And as far as this needs statement or needs assessment, it could be or seem initially intimidating, but there's a lot of resources available as you go, to come up with this. And the important piece of this is to present that, you know, again, clear and concise, to clarify a need that, you know, only getting this grant can relieve. So present that need where, you know, we must get this grant that only, you know, this can relieve, you know, for this. And you'll also want to note how you came to notice that problem or the nature of the problem, how you're going to fix that, you know, what's being done, and the purpose for developing. But again, problem statement, needs assessment, all the same thing. Your project objectives, it's just going to identify your objectives, you know, related to your outcome. And it's also going to talk about the methods it's going to be used to ensure that you meet all of your goals. And, you know, you want to have quantitative and measurable aspects, and if you want to have a problem statement and well-stated and detailed objective. And, you know, you want to stay realistic and, you know, make sure that the objectives can be measured as well as obtained. So it's always a good idea to, you know, be realistic and make sure that those objectives can be, you know, measured. Now, the biggest piece of a grant or a proposal is going to be your project narrative, your project methods or design. And that's, you know, what you'll spend the most time on probably in writing a proposal, depending on what part of the team you are. But this is by far the biggest piece of the proposal. Typically, like for federal guidelines, you know, they'll usually give you a limit on how many pages you can have in the narrative. You know, it's real common, you know, sometimes 25, sometimes 50, but they'll give you a limit of, depending on the guidelines, of, you know, how many pages, and it'll talk about, you know, font size, it'll talk about single or double spacing, you know, all those little things, referring back to when I was talking about, you know, reading those guidelines to know, you know, how much information you can put in here. Because, you know, when writing a proposal, it's really easy, you know, for folks to, you know, you get going, you might get 100 pages, but, you know, there's always going to be a you know, a limit, and it's always important, you know, to stay under that limit, and also, you know, the requirements. So for your narrative, it's just going to outline in great detail how that your project's going to function, and you know, in order to address whatever the issue is in your problem statement. And of course, the more details, the better. And it's, like I say, it's plenty of room for details, because it's going to be, you know, anywhere between 25 and 50 pages probably. And you know, this aspect of your proposal, it's the backbone of your project. So, you know, of course you want to be detailed and concise and prove every piece of your project that, you know, that you have that covered. And it's also financially necessary, you know, financially reasonable and necessary. As far as pieces to include in the narrative, there's several pieces that would, you know, go into the project narrative. You have your activities of your project, and, you know, the staff and the resources that's going to go into it. It's a good idea to have an in-depth flow chart of all of your organizational aspects, and, you know, that flow chart can go a lot of different directions, but generally it would indicate, you know, interrelating parts, show where staff's needed, you know, and resources, lots of other things. And, you know, we have a couple of, and I'm going to talk about them, this being one of them, Kentucky Leads, but we have a couple of successfully funded large federal proposals that we've dealt with and been successful with. And, you know, things that we go through here, as far as, you know, talking about flow charts or anything else, you know, if you get anything and you have questions, we're more than happy to provide you with, you know, just contact us. We're more than happy to get you examples, or, you know, we'll help in any way we can. So anything that you need whenever you know, get into this process, you know, contact any of us, and we're more than happy to help if we can. But as far as another piece to go into that narrative, you know, you're going to have an explanation of what you're going to achieve through implementing that project. And you always, of course, they always should include measurable results. And, graphs and diagrams is always a good idea. And most proposals have those, which, pull all your factors of your proposal together. And, when you're going through, it's always a good idea to separate that proposal from other grant applicants, by highlighting portions which are going to be looked at and considered as innovative or distinct, things that are going to jump out again. And you want that to include those highlights in your abstract that we talked about before, that one-page beginning. And as far as, instead of compiling all that data and sources into your document, it's always better to use appendices to guide the reviewers to the detailed statements. So most proposals will allow appendices, and again, it would refer to the guidelines. But if you refer to the guidelines, it'll say usually the appendices is unlimited, and you can put a bunch of stuff in there beyond your whatever the limit is, as far as guiding reviewers to those detailed statements or supplementary data. And for that in-depth analysis that's going to just eat up your 25 or 50 pages, you can refer to that, and a lot of more to that in the appendices. Another big piece of your proposal, and not all proposal submittals require this, but it's always good to have it, even if they don't require, I'm talking about required in the initial submittal, having it in there. It's always good to have a project evaluation. And on both of the large grants that we received, we had project evaluation. We have project evaluation on both. Ours was through UK, our evaluation piece, and I don't think he's on here today, but a lot of you may be familiar with Jeremiah Pope. He's our evaluation lead, and he's excellent. But as far as the evaluation goes, most of your federal agencies that distribute grants, they're going to require some sort of evaluation, just to ensure that the money they're giving you, that you're doing good things with it. And it looks good to the funders if you include that proposed evaluation process in your proposal. And typically you'll have whoever's your evaluator or evaluators going through. Again, ours was UK, and then we had a couple pieces there through that. But in saying that, whoever is going to evaluate yours, you would have a salary, a percentage of someone's FTE probably for the evaluator, and just other expenses, but that would be included in your budget. And you would include a detailed evaluation plan, and it can be important in that proposal process because, again, it looks good to your sponsoring agency. And also dissuades reviewers from second guessing based on a lack of evaluating. They're not going to look and say, well, where's the evaluation piece? It just clarifies all that. And you also want to indicate with the evaluation, when the evaluation is just basic stuff, when the evaluation is going to start, how much time you need to evaluate, and how the feedback will be distributed, and then also that schedule for comment or review. And then the last big piece of a proposal, and again, a very important piece, is your budget. So all proposals, they are going to have a limit for, how much, or most, I say all, most that you submit for are going to have a limit on how much your budget can be. So, it may be, for big, it may be $1 million a year, it may be 200,000 a year, it may be 50,000, it may be a one-year proposal, but usually there's going to be a limit on that budget. And so much goes into the budget. I'm not going to bog you down with, budget details for 20 minutes, but I just want to give an overview of the budget, of a project budget. But it's so important in submitting a proposal to have, a good budget, because the funders, they're going to look very quickly and very carefully at that budget, and how you have your funds budgeted and what it's going towards, and interrelating that back to your proposal you've submitted and all the technical pieces of that proposal. So as far as the budget goes, just general items, salaries, of course, should be comparable to those, that they should be reasonable and allocable salaries. If you're hiring new personnel, you'd want to account for additional space or equipment. I mean, just things like that, and thinking of, you want to include that in there. Equipment, you want to make sure that that's the type that's allowed. You don't want to put any expenses into the budget that's disallowed, because again, that would throw a red flag at your proposal and could get it flagged or not funded. So it's really important as far as, having things in the budget that are allowable and that also, directly relates in a reasonable way to your technical piece of your proposal. And if this one statement, it talks about an indirect cost rate applying to the proposal. Indirect costs, so just a quick explanation of what indirect costs are. That is basically overhead or administrative costs. So if you have all of the cost that goes into submitting a proposal, that's going to be your direct costs, as far as all the costs that, your salary, your travel, your just everything, participant support costs, could go on and on, but those are your direct costs. The indirect costs is, most sponsoring agencies allow this, and most agencies have an indirect cost rate, but that just allows for overhead. So that's on top of the direct costs. And indirect cost gets confusing, but the best way to think about it is it's administrative or overhead costs on top of all of the specificity and all of those specific costs that you have in your proposal, like the salary and the travel and all that. And the division between the direct and indirect costs shouldn't be in conflict, and your budget totals should be correct as far as your indirect costs, because a proposal may say indirect costs are limited to 10%. So if your agency allows indirects, then you're going to allow, you're going to put in 10% indirect costs on top of your direct costs, and you have to remember your overall amount that you're allowed on the proposal. So if you're allowed, let's say $1 million, it's not going to work out exactly like this, but a good way to think about it is you would have 900,000 in direct costs and 100,000 in indirect on a 10%. But it's not, that wouldn't be exact. It'd be a little different than that, but it's kind of the way to think about it. And as I'd said on the indirects, it's overhead. And if matching costs are required, it's cost share. Some Kentucky Leads required, when we submitted for this proposal, there's cost share on it. And basically cost share is, the applicant also has to provide costs toward the proposal. So we ask for whatever the maximum amount from the sponsor is, and then there also has to be a percentage of cost share, which would be matching costs. And we did this through salaries of people at KDE working on the project. So percentages of their salaries where they work directly on this project was covered through the agency and not from the money we got from the sponsor. So cost share, it can be in different ways. It could be third-party cost share, so provided from a third party, or it could be, as I talked about, salaries directly through your agency. And not all proposals, of course, have a matching requirement, but many do. And that's another important thing to look for when you're first looking in those guidelines. It's really important, because you may get in there and see that there's a cost share requirement, and then that your district or whoever you're submitting through can't meet that. And you don't want to spend all the time trying to write this grant or to submit this proposal if you can't meet the cost share requirement, because they won't fund you. So as far as the cost share goes, if it's important to see if there's cost share required for that project. As far as good organizational practices, that, you know, supporting your funding, that these strategies work well across the board, whether it's local, state, federal, private. You know, there could be lots, you may be with a foundation, could be lots of different ways to submit, but these general ideas and strategies, you know, work well across all areas. And you know, sometimes you may be asked to write multiple grants or support grant writing for, you know, multiple sources of funding within your districts. And, you know, just these strategies provide just kind of a foundation to base it on. I'm just going to go through these last several slides. Most of them are definitions, but I just want to go through them just so you're familiar with them. And I know on time here, I think, if I'm correct, I think we have about 7 minutes left. So I'm going to go through these definitions here. But as far as selection criteria, you use those to shape or design your project or activities to be carried out. And then selection criteria are also used by your peer reviews to score and evaluate the quality of your proposal. Commonly used selection criteria, how they judge your proposal, the quality of the project design, and each one of these, it just mentions it's the typical point range for these different, how they judge quality of the project design, you know, your quality of your project evaluation that we talked about, the need for the project and the significance, you know, all of those they would score. Also the quality of your management plan, your project services, your project personnel, the adequacy of resources, all scored. Most of them also do, and it's not in the PowerPoint, but they usually will have a point range for your budget and your budget narrative as well. And your budget narrative, that's just your justification. So you have to give explanations of each thing in your budget, you know, a few sentences describing how it's going to meet the needs of the proposal for each. And just common definitions used in a proposal that you submit. Just applicant's going to be the one requesting. This is all basic stuff. A community-based organization is a nonprofit that's representative of the community and provides educational related services to individuals within the community. LEA, you're all familiar with that. Commonly referred to as a school district. A SEA, which in Kentucky, of course, is KDE. It's the agency responsible for, you know, the state supervision of the schools. Budget is, these are just all things that are important in a grant. Your financial plan, grantee, I mean, project, just all self-explanatory stuff. As far as getting started with your proposal, it's good to allow plenty of time to prepare. This is a large overview, but, you know, 25 to 40 hours is kind of a good idea of how much time may be put into it. It's a lot of time. You know, 6 weeks is a good estimate for submitting that application package. Those guidelines are so important to know those front and back. Contacting that competition manager at the sponsor with questions, and, you know, that they're going to be the key program contact for answering all your questions. Following those guidelines are so important. And of course, structure your narrative according to the criteria, clear and concise language, justify that funding and making sure that all costs are reasonable and necessary, and then proofreading, you know, that proposal. It's very important also to not wait until the last minute to submit that application. And, you know, you don't want to get into a situation where you have to submit it electronically and it gets kind of complicated and you have to do it within hours, because, you know, they have a hard deadline. So if they say 5 o'clock on a Friday and you don't submit by 5 o'clock on a Friday, then all that time's wasted, and, you know, you can't submit the proposal. So it's just, we don't want to wait to the last minute. And occasionally, most now with proposals, most of them require electronic submission. Occasionally you'll see one that allows a hard copy. If it's always good to have a fresh pair of eyes, read it before you submit, make sure that everything's signed. And again, for questions, contact that manager. Common mistakes, not allowing enough time to submit, not reading that application in its entirety, not getting your signatures, not proofreading, and then of those guidelines. Those are all common mistakes to avoid. And then these last few slides, I just put this in here for your use, but it's a sample prep development timeline that we used and that we use. And it just, you can look through this and see it's a 6-week timeline, but it just goes through each week, and basically you'd have a weekly meeting for about an hour each week, and then everything else kind of handled via email and separate calls. And you know, just going through, but this timeline is essential, and you know, to setting, you know, a timeline like this and sticking to it is very important. But it just goes with each week and the pieces that goes in, and then, you know, the final week, get it to leadership to review, and you know, and then submit. Just the final thing I'll talk about is OSIL, or, you know, KDE, OSIL, Office of Special Education and Early Learning, which is, you know, us under Greta at KDE. And for as far as the recent ones that's been funded, where we've been involved, and we've had great teams on both of these, our Kentucky SPDIG, our State Personnel Development Grant, that's a 5-year project, and it's over $1 million a year. So we submitted that and was successfully funded for almost $6 million over 5 years. We're really, and then of course our Kentucky Leads, you know, this was recently funded, and you know, a 5-year project, and we're getting over $1 million for the great work that, you know, our Leads team is doing on this over 5 years. So these are 2 proposals that you know, we had great teams, and you know, collaboration being key, and you know, we're both funded for long term. Final tips: just becoming familiar with those guidelines. That's the key to making sure that you have everything in there, because proposals always require different things. And you know, it's also important to make sure you have someone who can electronically submit that and is familiar with that, whatever the electronic submittal process is, whether it be grants.gov or whatever else, but that's the most common one. And then questions, if you have any questions now. I know we're right on 10 o'clock, and I'm on my last slide, so hopefully the timing is good here. But if you have any questions now or in the future, we're happy to help. And I just put my information on here in my cell, and appreciate your time. And again, it was great speaking to everyone, and enjoy your weekend and enjoy this beautiful weather. And thank you all.
Thank you, Jonathan. A lot of great information. It was seeing in some of the chat comments about the amount of work that's involved. It's fascinating to listen to a half an hour and reality, months and months and months, and committee after committee. A lot of hard work to make any grant go, but also just to personalize it a little for this one in particular. Again, this PowerPoint will be up on SharePoint, as will the recording of the seminar. So and I would urge you to go back and connect to those 2 links. Grants, .org is outstanding tool, and found it very user-friendly, and click around, play around with it while this information that Jonathan shared is fresh in your mind, and it will really make some application and make some connections to what he was sharing. And again, the cell number's there. Jonathan is a great friend and a great resource. So it's been great listening to you. And Dr. Williams, I know we have our dress rehearsals and we've practiced this do fairly well, but we are going to go into breakout rooms.
Yep, that's correct, Pete. Thank you so much. And again, thank you, Jonathan. So before we go into our breakout rooms, I do want to just kind of go over our group norms, just to kind of keep it up at the forefront of everything that we do. So it's to participate respectfully, be considerate and welcome multiple viewpoints, devote your attention to those speaking and sharing, ask questions for clarification, be courageous and speak your truth, own your intentions and your impacts, and honor our time together. So those are our group norms. I just kind of wanted to just reiterate those before we go into our breakout rooms. So your facilitators for today will be Pete, Kathy, and Andrea. So they will be facilitating your group. So in a couple of seconds, we will break out, and then when we come back, we'll discuss the things any things that came out in your individual groups. So I am about to send everyone to their groups, and I hope you have a wonderful breakout session.